A warm welcome to the program today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up within the hour. Nigeria among 13 countries admitted into BRICS. The gloves come off these remaining days to the U.S. presidential election as Trump and Harris trade insults. Plus, as the world marks another UN Day, Secretary General Antonio Gutteres calls attention to world peace. Let's begin the world today. Nigeria has been named one of 13 countries admitted into BRICS at its meeting in Kazan in Russia. Her inclusion follows a substantial increase in foreign capital inflows from BRICS nations, which have reportedly surged by 189% in the first half of 2024, totaling $1.27 billion compared to $438.72 billion during the same period of 2023. As of August last year, Nigeria's Vice President Kashim Shettima had said Nigeria did not apply for membership of BRICS following the admission of Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. When asked about it, Mr. Shettima had said, there are so many variables that need to be taken into cognizance. We have to evaluate so many tendencies and issues that require engagements with the Economic Advisory Council, the Federal Executive Council, and even the National Assembly before an informed decision towards joining the BRICS would take place. BRICS, an intergovernmental organization, comprises Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa as original members. At the meeting on Wednesday, Russian President and host of the meeting in Kazan proclaimed the start of a new world order, saying the process of forming a multipolar world order is underway, a dynamic and irreversible process. I want to bring in now Professor of International Economics and consultant at the ECOWAS on Common Investment Market, Jonathan Aru, who joins us from Abuja. Professor Aru, thank you for joining us on the program today.
Thank you, my sister.
What do you make of this news? Nigeria's admission as I understand it, a partner of BRICS, not really a member.
Well, congratulations to Nigeria. That's a new development. It equally shows that Nigeria is seen as being admissible to other countries in the world. Earlier on, the founding countries, about 4 of them, later became 5 when South Africa joined a year later. And then just some few years ago, 2003, additional countries were joined. Additional few countries were joined. But now Nigerian were told, and Nigeria showed interest in November of 2023, and they were saying within the next 2 years. And just within 1 year, Nigeria became a member. I think it's a good news. It's a good news.
Yeah, the fact that membership was fast-tracked. But from what I'm reading, it says Nigeria is a partner to BRICS. Nigeria and these other 13 nations that have been mentioned. What's the difference between a partner and a member?
Thank you, because when the countries that joined before Nigeria actually were admitted, they were not state parties. They were not a member. They were just given some sort of opportunity to be there before being given full admission. And that is the status given to Nigeria today. We cannot become members. I think they may have some conditions which actually will allow the country to be a member. Just like African Continental Free Trade Area, when you actually sign, you are not a state party yet until you ratify. So maybe there are certain other things which Nigeria need to do before it becomes a full member. So I think that is it. So, and that is true of every organization anyway. You first of all show your interest, you are going to be admitted, and then later on, after other conditions are met, then your membership is guaranteed, and then you become a full member. Or that's what we call state party under African Union.
So me and my colleagues were talking about this earlier on, trying to decipher what exactly would be the benefits for Nigeria joining BRICS, because Nigeria is also a member of so many other international economic organizations, some of which have sort of manipulated, I would say, some of our economic policies that we see today. What would be the benefits of Nigeria joining this group of nations?
Well, specifically, the main reason why BRIC was formulated was to actually look into a new order within the multilateral institutions, particularly the global economic governance institution of IMF, World Bank, and WTO. It has been seen that there is dominance of the Western powers in all these three major global governance economic institutions. I mean, the surprise thing is that Russia is among the developed countries that occupy the seat under this global economic governance institution. But Russia is actually a country that is supporting the coming of the BRICS. So the immediate gain we expect is that Nigeria being a member, then that means that we can talk under the same one voice in all these institutions. I remember during the ministerial conference in Argentina, where I participated, countries were sitting according to their different groupings. And therefore, when countries sit according to their groupings, they bring a consolidated position within all those multilateral institutions. And with that position, their voices are likely to be heard. Let me say that as at now, about 25% of the countries in the world are members of these BRICS. And 50% of the population of the 25% of the GDP of the global economy belong to these BRICS, and 50% of them in terms of population. And the number is possibly increasing. So clearly speaking, you cannot deny the impact of this increasing number in terms of GDP and in terms of population of human beings living in this country under this multilateral governance institution, particularly IMF, World Bank, and the WTO, including even the United Nations Security Council. So we expect Nigerian voice will be heard being a member of BRICS. When we become member anyway, since we are not yet a full member.
Yeah, until we become a full member of BRICS. But perhaps, that 50% you're talking about may have influenced what the Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Wednesday when he proclaimed the start of a new world order. The process of forming a multipolar world order is underway. He says a dynamic and irreversible process. Do you see Nigeria being part of this new world order?
Well, that's okay. The global order is never static. You have a unipolar system, you have multipolar system, you have bipolar system. So things are just changing on a daily basis. And this only will continue until perfection comes, maybe until eternity. And therefore, since we are a member of this BRICS, I believe also that we shall have a collective voice among others to be able to speak to the multilateral environment in terms of economic policies, in terms of political dimensions, of allocation of things in the global economy, and in terms of making sure that fairness is given particularly to developing countries. Let me restate that developing countries have not been seen to actually occupy a position where their voice can be heard clearly, whether it is in IMF, World Bank, or even WTO. So as a result of these groupings, and Nigeria is big enough a country to be able to, for its voice to be heard anyway, with over 200 and something million population and a GDP the biggest in Africa. So Nigeria needs to be heard. So belonging to this group will not only expand the BRICS position, but equally give Nigeria an opportunity to be heard within the global setting. So we can be again from it. But again, let me say this. It is not joining association that matters. Our political and economic environment also must actually seem to be put in a very good order. And that is why the respect we wanted the global economy to give us will actually be a realistic respect, not only population, but a good macroeconomic policy management.
Yes, and I know that, for some Nigerians who are just, watching this show and have no idea what we're talking about, it seems like we're talking over their heads. This is all political speak, when you come to organizations like this. But to the man on the street, what does joining BRICS mean for Nigeria's economy? How does that trickle down to the bread and butter for the ordinary Nigerian?
That's a very difficult question because I don't know how to explain to the man on the street that, praise God, Nigeria is a member of BRICS. Because what they wanted to see is that there's food on the table, they can send their children to school. And that is why I said that joining a group within the global environment is not as important as an effective macroeconomic policy management of the economy in terms of price level, in terms of growth, in terms of external management, and in terms of inflation. These are the 4 basic macroeconomic policy objectives that affect the common man of the street. If joining the BRICS will actually give us a better management of this, let it be so. But if it will not, I think we better see what we can do to make sure that these macro management policies are actually put in order so that our joining will command the desired expected wanted within the global economy.
Thank you so much.
And that is when the man on the street will be happy. Thank you.
Well, I guess the man on the street will have to watch more conversations like this to understand, how important BRICS is to Nigeria. And for the rest of us who do understand a little bit, we still need to see how BRICS interprets into the kind of life that we live. Thank you for joining us on the program, Professor Jonathan Aru.
Thank you. Thank you, madam.
Well, staying with the BRICS summit, which is where UN Secretary General Antonio Gutteres is on this UN day. Mr. Gutteres told leaders at this meeting that there needs to be peace in Gaza, in Lebanon, Ukraine, and in Sudan. His message comes as Israeli forces continue with the operation in Gaza against Hamas militants and against Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Russia's invasion of Ukraine continues.
The Pact for the Future includes important steps on disarmament, including the first multilateral agreement on nuclear disarmament in more than a decade, and steps that address the weaponization of outer space and the use of lethal autonomous weapons. Across the board, we need peace. We need peace in Gaza, with an immediate ceasefire, the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages, the effective delivery of humanitarian aid without obstacles, and we need to make irreversible progress to end the occupation and establish the two-state solution as it was recently reaffirmed once again by a UN General Assembly resolution. We need peace in Lebanon, with an immediate cessation of hostilities, moving to the full implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701. We need peace in Ukraine, a just peace in line with UN Charter, international law, and General Assembly resolutions. We need peace in Sudan, with all parties silencing their guns and committing to a path towards sustainable peace. Those were the messages I have delivered to the high-level segment of the General Assembly in September in New York.
Leaders attending the 16th BRICS summit in Kazan in Russia issued a declaration covering a wide range of issues today, from the reform of the UN to ongoing global conflicts. The declaration has 134 provisions in total, one of which is addressing the reform of the UN. It identifies 3 pillars of cooperation, which include political security, economy and finance, and cultural exchanges. It welcomes the interests from the global south and endorses a partnership with emerging markets and developing countries. Much earlier, President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, commented on the war in Ukraine, calling it a result of actions of forces acting in logic of domination over all and everybody. According to him, Ukraine is one of these examples. It was used and it has been used for creation of strategic threats for Russia, ignoring at the same time our vital interests, fair concerns and infringement of rights of Russian-speaking people, and now they don't even hide the goal to defeat Russia in a strategically way. I must say that this is illusion who can have only those who do not know Russian history, do not pay attention to unity formed during the centuries, power of spirit and solidarity of the people. Welcome back to The World Today. Today, October 24, is the United Nations Day, marking the anniversary of the entry into force in 1945 of the UN Charter. With the ratification of this founding document by the majority of the signatories, including the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, the United Nations officially came into being. UN Day is celebrated every year. This year, the UN is marking its 79th anniversary. Today, the organization boasts of 193 member states and continues to play a crucial role in global governance. UN Chief Antonio Gutteres, in his annual message, says the body was built by the world for the world, and it's a place for countries to unite behind global solutions to global problems.
The United Nations was built by the world for the world. Since 1945, it has been the place for countries to unite behind global solutions to global problems. Solutions that ease tensions, build bridges, and forge peace. Solutions to eradicate poverty, spur sustainable development, and stand up for the most vulnerable. Solutions that deliver life-saving relief to people living through conflicts, violence, economic hardship, and climate disasters. Solutions that level the scales of justice and equality for women and girls. Solutions that tackle issues that were unimaginable in 1945: climate change, digital technology, artificial intelligence, and outer space. In September, the General Assembly adopted the Pact for the Future, the Global Digital Compact, and the Declaration on Future Generations. Together, these milestone agreements will help ensure that the United Nations system adapts, reforms, and rejuvenates, so it is fit for the changes and challenges around us and delivers solutions for all. But our work will always be rooted in the timeless values and principles of the UN Charter and international law, and in the dignity and human rights of every person. In today's troubled world, hope is not enough. Hope requires determined action and multilateral solutions for peace, shared prosperity, and a thriving planet. Hope requires all countries working as one. Hope requires the United Nations. On United Nations Day, I call on all countries to keep this beacon for the world and its ideals shining.
UN Secretary General Antonio Gutteres. Joining us now is the UN Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator for Nigeria, Mr. Muhammad Malik Fall. Thank you for joining us on the program today.
Thank you for having me in your program.
And congratulations to you, marking another UN Day here in Nigeria.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I think, let me just wish to everyone, I think in Nigeria and across the world, a happy UN Day. It resonates well in Nigeria because we are a big UN family here, made of over 25 agencies spread across the country. Also present in different fronts, in the development front, the peace architecture, the human rights protection, but mostly also the humanitarian assistance front. And I think celebrating across the country also the staff who deliver for UN and the people for whom we are delivering is an important milestone for us.
The Secretary General's address to the rest of the world today, some of which we heard at the BRICS summit earlier today, focused on peace. And I think that that's what he wants the world to understand. The world currently facing a different crisis in the Middle East and Europe, even here in Africa. Good thing he remembered the war in Sudan, which is still ongoing. How does this year's theme reflect the present global challenges?
I think in many respects. Let me just remind also that as the Secretary General say, I mean, our organization was created 79 years ago, and it was in the aftermath of maybe one of the worst global conflict, which was the Second World War. And it's in this context that the international community got together with the commitment that they are building peace, they are reinforcing security, they are reinforcing solidarity between nations. We have gone through a long journey of 79 years, but what we have seen in the recent years is that that more and more nations are coming back to what we tried to prevent and what we tried to avoid in the aftermath of the Second World War. We are seeing that nations are using war, are using gun to settle dispute, to settle difference. And what we believe is a means of settling dispute should be dialogue, should be peaceful approach to address those issues. You mentioned some of the big conflicts that are shaking the world as we speak. And by the way, this is unprecedented. It's almost said that between 2023 and 2024, the world is facing a situation which has not been seen since the Second World War. And I think that's time for us to really give a broader echo to the message of the Secretary General calling the nation to peace. And beyond those kind of conflict that you mentioned, Middle East, Sudan, Ukraine, but you still have some of the conflict also that are prevailing. As we speak in the Sahel, which is part of our region, we are seeing extreme violence, we are seeing terrorism, we are seeing all sorts of security-related issues or challenges that are impacting on people's life and on people's livelihood. And I think that's time for the humanity to double down on what the ideal of the Charter is and to come back to that ideal, which to me is the only way we can settle the issues that we have in front of us.
Yes, but do you think that countries really want to settle these issues? Do you think that countries are aligning with the Secretary General's message of peace? I know the UN talks about this all the time. I think even his message this year is very similar to what he made last year, also calling for peace, because then you also have the Ukraine crisis. We didn't have the crisis in the Middle East. But do you think the countries really are listening to what the Secretary General is saying?
It's difficult to say. If you see the kind of turning that some of the conflict has taken, the Ukraine has started 2022. Since then, it is there. We have seen in the Middle East, it started at a scale which is now unfortunately growing, and we have seen even Lebanon and some countries in the region now deeply and radically involved into the conflict. Those are aspects that sometimes let us know that it's time for us to double down on this message of peace. You have seen in our continent also Sudan, which started 2023, and since then, what we are seeing is that the number of people affected is growing, the suffering is growing, the displacement is growing, the loss of life, the loss of livelihood is growing. In this context, it's difficult to say that our message is well copied. I believe but it's a message that we need to keep reinforcing. We need to keep expanding. It's a message that we need to keep giving. And we should not back off, and we should not be deterred by what is happening. We have seen in human history probably worse period than what we are experiencing now. But yes, a breakthrough have allowed to have peace. A breakthrough have allowed to bring together nation as we did to found or to create the United Nations. That's the hope we have. That's the direction we are working in, which to me is also something which is an important message to give here in Nigeria. Because let's not forget also, Nigeria is one of the most important nations in sub-Saharan Africa and in the world at large. And I think Nigerians' voice added to this claim for peace, for multilateralism, for solidarity, for changing the approach to which state or government settle their difference, I think is something which is important. And I wanted to take this opportunity to make that appeal also and remind the role of the country we are in and how important it is.
It is important. And I noticed that the UN agencies, mainly in Nigeria, are involved in a lot of humanitarian work, especially in the northern part of the country, as a result of the insurgency that exists there. Now the banditry, and then, some other natural disasters that are taking place. Many UN agencies are focused on humanitarian work. There's already a project in place for certain states which have been, severely affected by some of these insurgency and natural disasters. Would you say there's been a downtick, however, in the challenges that exist in the country, seeing that the UN has been here for so long?
Yeah, let me first say that I'm happy that you mentioned that dimension of our work, because sometimes when you talk about UN, people tend to look at the difficulties of making decisions or getting breakthrough in the Security Council or in the General Assembly. And what people tend to forget is that so many people are suffering in the world. Over 300 million people today need humanitarian assistance. And it's a front in which UN and its staff every single day, and its partner also, are taking the risk of their life, are going out of their way to try to save life, to try to reduce vulnerability, to enhance the protection of people. In Nigeria, that's what we are doing. You mentioned the northern part of the country, both northwest and northeast, where we have strong footprint and are engaging in assisting the people who really are in a kind of dire situation, and as shown by the recent flood that was experienced in the northern part. The 2 days after the flood that hit Maiduguri, with a broken dam, I led a very large UN delegation, not only to present our sympathy to the victims of the flood and to the authorities, but at the same time to have first-hand information, assess the situation, and really design and shape our response in a way that could really respond to the scale of the needs that we face on the ground. And since then, the needs are there. But I just wanted to say that humanitarian assistance is part of our work, but development assistance is the other part of our work also here in Nigeria. Because as we know, some of the humanitarian needs and the humanitarian situation that we face are the result of an exacerbation of fragility that are sometimes there prior to the humanitarian crisis or the humanitarian situation. And that's why we are also working with the government at a federal level, at a state level. We are engaged in what we call now localization, building on the civil society, building on the national and the local NGO. We are working also to combine the intervention that are linked to humanitarian assistance with something that look at more deeper the structural deficit that some of the part of the country are facing, and to address the root cause of the suffering of the people, and work really on something which is more sustainable. Of course, as I say earlier, having the state at federal and at local level in the driving seat. That's really what we are doing and who we are here in Nigeria. And I wanted to take this opportunity of today's celebration to also celebrate my colleagues who tirelessly and around the clock are working not only on the humanitarian assistance delivery only, but also working on the development assistance, which is another pillar of our work here in Nigeria. Back to you.
Oh, very good. And really, we do commend the UN workers in Nigeria who work so tirelessly. Nigeria is still on course with these 17 SDGs. Where would you say we are?
Let me say it's important. Thank you so much also for bringing me in the SDG, because this is one of the, I could call it even the most important social contract that the world has, and that the world government have with its own people. And every country has committed to address them and to put on track those SDGs. Unfortunately, when we launched them in 2015, we had a horizon of 15 years. Then what happened, COVID hit and have reversed and set back some of the progress we were making. Immediately after COVID, many parts of the world were experiencing economic downturn, which has not helped. Now, what we are saying is that we are left with a window of 5 years, and those 5 years is the time to double down, to accelerate. And one part of the Summit of the Future And one of the most important was also to look at how the SDGs should be financed, how we can increase the resources that are allocated to attaining those objectives. Now, Nigeria, as the rest of the world, are facing those challenge of delay, of being off track in many respects, due to some of the circumstances that I referred to earlier, COVID, economic challenge, and sometimes also climate-related shock. Like we talked just now about the flood, but before the flood, there was drought, there was heat wave. There are so many things that stand in front of us as a challenge. But I feel that the same way I was talking about determination to bring peace, the determination to move the agenda and to move the charter, in many respects, I think we have the same determination also to move the SDG. Nigeria, as the rest of the world, are facing challenge of being in track. I think the recent report of the Secretary General was saying that, globally speaking, I think only 17% of the indicator and the objective of the SDG are on track. But I truly believe that in Nigeria we can make a difference. And I just wanted to share a word there by saying, being the biggest demography of the continent, being one of the biggest economy of the continent, but at the same time having so much potential and opportunity in terms of quality of human resources, in terms of very vibrant private sector, in terms of very vibrant art and cultural industry, in terms of innovation. If we capitalize on all those opportunity and potential that I have mentioned, I'm sure Nigeria can make the difference. And if Nigeria make the difference, let's be clear, it's not only for Nigeria, but it's for the sub-Saharan Africa. But if it's for the sub-Saharan Africa, it's for the world. And that's why we are saying that, we will succeed in Nigeria for the rest of the continent and the world to succeed. But if we fail in Nigeria, it will drive the rest of the continent and the rest of the world into failure. This is why for us, UN today, in our partnership with the government, both at federal and at state level, accelerating on this SDG become critical. And I can tell you, from now to 2030, the entire UN energy will be devoted to support the government in this process of acceleration. We will be devoted to focus on the key priority, which are 6 on the acceleration pathway for the SDG. And those 6, if you allow me, I will just mention food security and agriculture, social protection and job creation, education, energy, and mainly transition to renewable energy, mitigation of the climate change, and of course also a focus on innovation and technology, how they can also help to accelerate in this area. And if you look at the area that I refer to as acceleration, they mirror and they are aligned with the renewed hope agenda of the administration of President Bola Tinubu. And that's what we bet on, to be sure that we will have the government along with us, civil society, the private sector, and to make Nigeria in a position of accelerating and putting back on track the indicator of the SDG. That's my hope. That's what I devote my work to. That's what the entire team devote themselves to. And I believe that with this, we will make a difference in Nigeria. And by making difference in Nigeria, we'll do it for the rest of the continent and we'll do it for the world at large. Back to you.
We definitely want to do it for Nigeria and for the world at large. Mr. Malik Fall, thank you so much. Mohammed Malik Fall, I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for speaking with us. And once again, a happy UN Day to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me in your program. And let me also use this opportunity to once again wish happy UN Day to everyone, because UN is about the people. And part of those people are the people of Nigeria. And I wanted to wish them also a happy UN Day. Thank you.
Thank you again. To the U.S. election now, the presidential candidates Kamala Harris for the Democratic Party and Donald Trump for the Republican Party have been hard at work trying to convince voters in more battleground states to vote for either candidate. But they've also been hard at work trading insults. During a town hall on Wednesday, Harris said she believes her opponent, Trump, is a fascist, saying Trump wants unchecked power. Trump responded by saying Harris has a warped mind and is a threat to democracy. country. Today, the vice president is focused on one of the key battleground states of Georgia, where she'll be for the first time in the campaign by former President Barack Obama. Joined by Barack Obama, eyes have been on Georgia ever since the Democrats unexpectedly triumphed there 4 years ago. While Harris does not necessarily need to win here to become the next president, Trump almost certainly does. Trump is visiting two key battleground states, heading first to Arizona and then to Nevada. Checking in on the former president's campaign in Georgia, Trump touted his message of border security. He's got a huge task ahead of him, as several states, including battlegrounds of North Carolina and Georgia, are setting records on their respective first day of early voting.
And it's down to 12 days. We had the great... A lot of people all along the highways were driving up, and there's a lot of love. We're going to have a big election. We're going to have a November 5th, and you'll probably, many of you have... Who's already voted? And unfortunately, Biden and Kamala, nobody knows her as Harris. Do you ever know? I talk about it all the time. You say Harris. Everyone says, who is that? The vice president. Can you believe she's the vice president? She came in last. He picked her. She came in last, and now she's running. They say that in Israel, I could maybe run. If things didn't work out here, you could run for prime minister of Israel, and I'd get 97% of the vote. So, and of course I kid, because you know what happens when you do the little sarcasm and the kidding. They go, well, he said he's running for, that's the fake news doing that. And that's a lot of fake news you have back there. That's very impressive.
And in what is slowly becoming the norm at their campaigns, the Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris, at her residence in Washington, called Trump a fascist.
So yesterday we learned that Donald Trump's former chief of staff, John Kelly, a retired four-star general, confirmed that while Donald Trump was president, he said he wanted generals like Adolf Hitler had. Donald Trump said that because he does not want a military that is loyal to the United States Constitution. He wants a military that is loyal to him. He wants a military who will be loyal to him personally, one that will obey his orders even when he tells them to break the law or abandon their oath to the Constitution of the United States. In just the past week, Donald Trump has repeatedly called his fellow Americans the enemy from within, and even said that he would use the United States military to go after American citizens. And let's be clear about who he considers to be the enemy from within. Anyone who refuses to bend a knee or dares to criticize him would qualify, in his mind, as the enemy within, like judges, like journalists, like nonpartisan election officials. It is deeply troubling and incredibly dangerous that Donald Trump would invoke Adolf Hitler, the man who is responsible for the deaths of 6 million Jews and hundreds of thousands of Americans. All of this is further evidence for the American people of who Donald Trump really is. This is a window into who Donald Trump really is.
Welcome back to The World Today. We're staying with the campaign trail in the United States. And who do we find? It's former President Bill Clinton urging Arizona residents to cast their votes for Vice President Kamala Harris. It took a swing at former President Donald Trump, accusing him of stoking paranoia about immigrants. The former president also drew parallels between Arizona's state Senate race and the broader national political scene, while also taking aim at Senate candidate Kari Lake and Vice Presidential candidate J.D. Vance.
I thought, this is like a beautiful microcosm of the campaign that Kamala Harris is running for president. You've got a person that grew up under sometimes challenging circumstances, who made something of his life running against someone who is physically attractive but believes that politics is a performance art. And where, like J.D. Vance, she has to be prostrate before the master. This is all funny to me because I used to play golf with Donald Trump. And he wasn't at all to other people 20 years ago like he is now. If people know the Justice Department can investigate this, then they will know they got to be careful in raising food prices too high, and you can know whether they could be lower.
I want to bring in the VOA's congressional correspondent, Catherine Gibson. Catherine is in Washington. I don't think I've seen this many number of former U.S. presidents campaigning for a candidate before, and all of them taking swipe at a former president, Donald Trump. There have been more insults from both sides now that we're seeing. It appears all gloves are off, Catherine.
That's right. We are entering the very end of the campaign when you see all of the big names out on the campaign trail. And I think there is a difference in tone. You see a lot more pointed criticism of Donald Trump. You know, Democrats recently have said more and more that Donald Trump is mentally unfit for office. Now, I think the Harris campaign would also argue that calling him a fascist is just stating the facts. It's not name calling. So, you know, a little bit of a difference in words there.
Yeah, a little bit of difference in words. But I remember that after the assassination attempt on Trump in July, political figures, even the former presidents, also talked about toning down the rhetoric. There doesn't seem to be any of that happening these few days to the election.
The first attempted assassination of Donald Trump seems like it was years and years ago now. So to hear you say it was only back in July, you're right. Political memory in this country is incredibly short, and we very quickly moved past that time where everybody was calming, trying to say, we're not going to make fun of each other, we're not going to, you know, say mean things. It very quickly passed in this country, and now we're back onto the usual political debate, the back and forth, particularly as we wind down, as we have, 12 days left until Election Day.
Yeah, and I know that this is probably happening because, you know, they're battling for literally the souls of the battleground states. Very important in this election. Could you explain why?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's strange the way things work in this country here in the United States, because we have something called the Electoral College that means that they have to get a certain number of votes to get over that threshold and be nominated president. We know that there are a certain set of states that will vote Democrat reliably, certain set of states that will reliably vote Republican. What it really comes down to is a handful, about 8 to 10 states, that may go either way and that will be the deciding factor. That's why you see the presidential candidates in those states, and pretty much only those states, in the final weeks of the election.
Catherine, what other figures does Trump have on his side? I mean, I think the largest of them all we've seen is Elon Musk, the tech billionaire, who's handing out $1 million to registered voters ahead of the election. $1 million every day? Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, and it's kind of up for debate whether that's legal in a campaign or not. We've been speaking to some election experts here in the United States, and they're dumbfounded by all of this. This is highly unusual to be doing during a campaign, and like I said, maybe illegal, but certainly Elon Musk is absolutely the most visible of Trump's campaign surrogates. He's out there on the campaign trail all the time. And what's more, he's tweeting on X all the time about what he sees as the problems in the U.S. government. We know that if Trump is elected, Elon Musk is probably going to be heading up some sort of government inefficiency task force to weed out government inefficiency, what they say are problems within government agencies, to look at how the U.S. can be run more like a business.
Yeah, Americans really have to think if that is something they want after November 5. Catherine, thanks again for joining us on the program.
Good to be with you.
Away from U.S. elections, the Commonwealth Heads of State, Heads of Government, beg your pardon, is preparing to defy the United Kingdom and agree plans to examine reparatory justice for the transatlantic slave trade. Downing Street insists the issue is not on the agenda for the summit of 56 Commonwealth countries, which begins in the Pacific island nation of Samoa tomorrow. Diplomatic sources, however, say officials are negotiating an agreement to conduct further research and being a meaningful conversation about an issue which could potentially leave the UK owing billions of pounds in reparations. Reparatory justice for slavery can come in many forms, including financial reparations, debt relief, an official apology, educational programs, building museums, economic support, and public health assistance. Well, the Republic of Korea is interested in stability and progress of West Africa and Nigeria in particular. Hence, it takes seriously its relations with the country. Issues relating to Nigeria-Korea relations were discussed at the joint seminar between Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, the NIIA, and the Republic of Korea in Nigeria. The deputy head of mission of the Korean embassy, Ms. Lee Jong-wen, says these conversations are necessary to improving bilateral ties. The Director General of the NIIA, Professor Saye Ehosa, says spotlight on diplomacy is as a result of Korean interest in Nigeria and relations between the two dating back to 1980.
Korea has been trying really hard to how to further develop the bilateral relations between Korea and Nigeria. And to do that, we thought that maybe we have to look into each other's diplomatic strategy first, so that we can find some connections and how we can develop further the relations between our two countries based on that. So I think we did exactly that today, and I hope today's discussion can lead to the further strengthening of the bilateral relationship between the two countries.
Korea has emerged as one of the industrial centers in the world at this time that Nigeria is reaching out to rich countries for investment in our country, because that's the linchpin of our economic diplomacy and the development pillar of our 4D foreign policy. Korea has come in as a very strategic partner. As you know, the Korean interests in Nigeria are very huge, and it's been recorded that in 2023, Nigeria had more than half of the contracts that Korean companies had all over Africa. So that tells you how very strategic Korea is to Nigeria and to Africa as a whole.
Now, this is the part of the bulletin we can take a chill pill, relax, alongside the Britain's King Charles, who's dropped his royal regalia for a day of a more comfortable outfit and a pair of sunglasses. He looks cool, touring a village in Samoa. He participated in the mangrove walk today with some Samoan officials. Moata Chief Lenatai Victor Tamapua led King Charles through the mangrove reserve on a walkway rebuilt in 2018, highlighting restoration efforts and the impact of climate change on the ecosystem and community. The king is in Samoa for the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting as the symbolic head of the Commonwealth. He greeted officials and locals and posed for a photograph with members of the public.
Okay, thank you guys. We'll see you later at the tree panel.
Well, what can I say? Royals, they're just like us. Thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani.